I'm curious to get your thoughts. Did you by any chance hear any all none of kind of Commissioner Joel Klatt on some of his proposals for the college football playoffs?
I haven't dived into Joel Klatt's ideas. I've heard lots of other ideas, and I think that the need for a commissioner is greater now than it ever has been. This is another conversation that I was just having, even today, this morning, before coming on here, about the proposal that we heard on Tuesday from college football coaches at their convention about some form of college football calendar reform and how the coaches want to see a portal period of 10 days in early January. And I think that's great to start the conversation. I also think it's naive and vastly short-sighted to only have that part of the conversation. Like, there needs to be a larger conversation about the entire calendar and what you want to do with spring football as it relates to the changing world with the transfer portal, how you want to structure the season. And yes, the college football playoff is involved in that too. How do you get that done? You have to have someone who's leading the conversation. And I mean, I think it's better to be a person like Joel Klatt from the broadcast world than it is to do it with like Nick Saban, who's going to see things from the coach's point of view. And I mean, Nick Saban retired. So is this something that he would really want to take on? Like, I know James Franklin and others have spoken up and said, hey, whenever Coach Saban wants to take over, let's give it to him. And, Nick Saban generally does a good job at whatever he does. I don't think that's the spot for him. I like Nick Saban. I like seeing Nick Saban, like, for selfish purposes on game day. I think he's been fantastic. Somebody with the worldview, the college football worldview of Joel Klatt, whether it's him or not, I think is the right person to put into that job. And the sport needs it. The sport needs a leader who can work with all of the interested parties.
So one of the things and they kind of go together, that he was suggesting to kind of to help with the seeding, was to have two different committees, right? One for kind of the bowls and to lose those tie-ins, and they oversee that. Then the other committee that is kind of the proponent of a 14-team playoff and not a 12-team playoff. And he was suggesting that you have, excuse me, you have a one major bowl at the end, and it would be at the Rose Bowl because, for whatever the reason, that's his favorite bowl, and it's like the granddaddy of them all. It's nostalgic, and
Sure.
you end it on January 1st, but you keep all the games on campus up until then. If you could change one thing right now to help with the seeding, so you don't get a 5, 6, 7, 8 matchup in the semifinals, how would you go about sorting it out?
Two things. One, I think you put the best four teams as the top four seeds. Your reward for winning a conference championship is that you won a conference championship, that you've got that trophy, and I think that still means something, and it should mean something if you play in any of these leagues. Like, to be named the conference champ, like that's the next best thing to winning a national championship. It's valuable. It doesn't winning a conference championship doesn't impact your seed in other sports. I don't know why it should impact your seed in football. It should guarantee you a spot in the playoff if you're one of the top 5 conference champions, but I don't think that it should be 1 through 4 are all conference champs in the seeding order. It should be the teams that are viewed as the best 4. And then second, I think that those top teams should get a chance to play at home on their campuses, like what Joel is saying. I'm not sold on the idea of having every game on campus until you get to the championship, but I definitely think the first 2 rounds should be.
Yeah, you rotate the semis and then have the culmination at the end. So
yeah, okay, I like that. I like the idea of having the first 2 rounds all the way through the quarterfinals on campus sites. It's great. I mean, I was at Ohio State for the Ohio State Tennessee game in the first round, and it was right up there with it was like nothing I've experienced in college football. It's different. I'm not saying that it's hands down better than going to a bowl site where you have lively participation from both fan bases, but it's there's an energy about that comes with having a college football playoff game on campus, and I think that the sport needs to tap into that even more.
One of the things, and this is actually where I would have started before expansion. He was a little more specific, but I was like, hey, it would be pretty cool because we could get away from strength of schedule and being so worried about rankings if everybody played the same number of conference games. He's a 9-1-2 guy, which he's suggesting 9 conference games, 1 Power 4 out of conference, and 2 G5 out of conferences.
Sure.
You think that's doable for everybody across the board?
Anything's doable. Yeah, they could do it. The SEC is not going to voluntarily sign up for that. Like it's gonna have to be required, which is again where it comes back to leadership and having some kind of a governing body or a czar of the sport who has the power to actually make people do things. But as long as it's left up to the conferences to make decisions for themselves, the SEC is not going to play 9 conference games.
If it's a 14, hypothetically, Mitch, I'm just looking for some pushback on why they wouldn't. Let's say you get 14 teams and you know the league champs in, the team that loses in the championship game is in, or you reserve slots for the Big Ten and the SEC. Why wouldn't the SEC want to keep that inventory in-house?
Yeah. Well, I think in their view, they beat each other up enough. And the way that they're going to look at it is the reason that their teams struggled in the postseason this year or didn't get the invites to the playoff that they thought were deserved, those factors would only increase if you added another conference game. Like the opportunity to lose, you had one more opportunity to lose, and the SEC wasn't peak.
Splitting the 14 to 20 mil anyway within the conference. Why not? Like, why not?
Well, it's about more than money. I mean, the SEC has a lot of money and they get a lot of money from their broadcast partners. I think if it was just a conversation about money, then maybe this would be an easier sell. It's a conversation about giving teams opportunities to play for the championship, and they feel, I don't know if I necessarily agree, but they feel it would have more of a detriment on their resumes to give every team one more opportunity to lose. Simple
Mitch,
as that.
Do you think the compromise would be, hey, we'll guarantee you 4 spots if you go to 9 games?
Okay. Then you can start to talk. That's to me, I would think yes. I would think if that's a guarantee, then you get him at the table.
I think you do. He suggested 4-4-2-2-1, which would probably like a Notre Dame type, and then 1 group of 5.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some
years that's going to be out of whack. Like you might. That's the thing we have to be wary of is like becoming a prisoner of the moment, where you look at how you want to set things up and say, all right, this is how it would have fit, and it would have been all nice and tidy to do it this way in the 2024 season, and then the 25 season comes or the 26 season comes, and you try to apply those same puzzle pieces, and it's all out of whack. So I don't know. I'd have to look at more data over a number of years to see if that would add up, or you end up leaving out very deserving teams or having too many teams from a conference. There's going to be things that look messed up, and that's the way it is in every system. Like I was amused during the wild card weekend, although it did get a little bit redundant and tiresome every time there was a game that that wasn't like down to the last second. So basically every game except the Monday night game. Hey, why did the committee put the put the Packers into the playoff? Why did the committee put the Bucks into the like, okay, we understand, we get it. Like it's never going to be perfect. So you have to keep that in mind. But I don't know if it's like, if it should be that regimented. I like the idea of guaranteeing the SEC 4 spots and the Big Ten 4 spots is fine. The idea of saying there is going to be a group of 5 every year is fine, but I think there needs to be more flexibility within the rest of the makeup of the playoff. I don't know, like, okay, this conference gets 2, this conference gets 2. Well, what happens when the ACC has a great year, or the Big 12 has a great year, or vice versa?
Yeah, Mitch, I tend to agree. And I know that DB doesn't like this, but I think that's headed this way anyway. The way to give yourself the most flexibility is just to go to 16.
Mm-hmm.
Go 4 SEC, 4 Big 10. I do think you guarantee a group of 5 spot, and then after that, it's just open. And then you still have the flexibility to reward conferences for being up while still guaranteeing the 2 big players at the table get what they want.
Okay. Hey, let me just say this.
Yeah.
Here's my biggest pushback, and then feel free, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not just expansion. Are we looking to just be do we just want more football, or do we think it's going to promote more competition? Because clearly, up to this point, whether it's the CFP, whether it's 4, whatever, the more teams you have in, the worse the competitive balance has been in the beginning, in the early stages. Fair?
I think
Fair?
it depends on how you seed it, but
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, because you went into this year with an average outside the semifinals of a 21-point spread.
Yeah.
Okay, so
part of that's a seeding problem, but yeah.
Okay, but to fix that, you can't. And Mitch, curious, you can't fix the seeding thing without some sort of uniformity on how to get there. So
that's fair. Yeah.
So why would you entertain more people to the party when you still don't know the dress code?
Because you get the 2 big. I mean, sorry, Mitch, I'll let you answer. But because you're trying to
go for it.
You're trying to keep the 2 biggest players happy. So like 16 is probably not the ideal number in terms of competitiveness at this point, but it might be the ideal number for keeping the Big 10 and SEC happy and still giving yourself flexibility with the rest of the conferences.
Because I probably wouldn't say much, Mitch, if you looked at me and you're like, DB, like it's a revenue generator, right? And I'll be like, oh, okay, more inventory, sure. Your TV partners, okay, but you can't tell me it's like I don't think you could convince me that you're trying to enhance the quality of what we're actually partaking in.
I'd like to see the quality of those first couple of rounds improve, and I think that you can.
But would you do that by adding more teams?
Well, the easy answer is no. Maybe in the second. If it was seeded more appropriately, I think the second round would look a little bit different than what we saw this year. Like stuff was out of order this year through the entire bracket because of the initial seeding being a mess. And you had things like Penn State's road to the semifinals versus Oregon's first game, when the last time we saw those 2 teams, or at least the last time we saw Oregon, it was beating Penn State. Like that kind of stuff could be avoided, or mostly avoided, more frequently avoided than it is in the current system. But yeah, I mean, if you go 1 through 16 and you have first round games, like there's going to be some clunkers. No different than what we saw on Wild Card Weekend. No different than what we see on the first weekend of the NCAA basketball tournament. Like in college football, it seems like a lot of times we get obsessed with like believing that everything's got to be a great game, and we've had some good games in the CFP this year, as you'd expect. It's just that we didn't get them in the first couple of rounds. That's kind of the nature of tournaments in general.
You know why I think that? This is just my opinion. Do you know why I think that is? Why we tend to have a little more angst over.
I have an idea, but go ahead.
It's because we sell people on this idea. It's a lie. We're like, oh man, competitive balance, and the more of the little guys, you give the little guy a chance, and it's disingenuous, and it drives me crazy, because what it really is it's just a ruse to allow more margin for error for teams at the top. It's not because historically double-digit dogs win back-to-back weeks like they could in the NFL. It's so number one, I don't like the pro model, because we're comparing it to a league that is built on parity. Like the NFL, like that's why the competitive balance in the NFL works. Maybe you'll get that way with college football, but I think it's what we're told should be the expectation of why we're doing it, and it never plays out that way. That's why I think people are combative with the visualization of the product.
Yeah, that's deeper than where I was going to go. I think the reason that we have these expectations for college football and the games to all be world beaters in the college football playoff is because of how exciting the regular season is. And week in and week out, it's week 6, it's week 7, it's week 8. There's great drama in this sport every single week. Like, you can check in on a Saturday night. If you miss a day and you check in on, let's say you're at a wedding on a Saturday in October and you miss college football for the entire day, and you get in front of your TV at 11 o'clock at night. Oh, what happened today? You're guaranteed that it was going to have been a wild day on some level. It's more entertaining on a week by week basis than any other sport that we have. So when we get to the playoff, you would hate to see that go down. You would hate to not experience that in what is supposed to be the pinnacle of competition in the sport. So there's just this expectation that the postseason should be even more exciting than the regular season, when the reality is you're not going to get that every time in the first, and especially in the first and second round.
Mitch, can I make an argument there? Because I think you're right, but I also think it's kind of a myth, because the reason there's always a good game over the course of the regular season is because you have so many games on one day, right? There's a lot of terrible games on Saturdays, too. But we don't pay attention to those. We focus on the ones that are really good. It's my same argument with March Madness, right? There's a ton of terrible games the first 2 rounds of March Madness, but we focus on the really good ones. There's just so many that we can throw the bad ones away. The problem with college football, I think right now, is the games are going to get more competitive, but when you get to the college football playoff, there's not enough games to hide the bad ones.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that conflicts with what I said. Not every game's great, but there's a great product out there somewhere to enjoy every single weekend. And that's a big part of the reason why it doesn't translate to every weekend in the postseason, because your inventory's down.
Or if you want more competition, then and stop trying to make people happy, because that's the duality of the frustration. And I know we joked that it was deep, right? But the message is we want to be everything. We want to be this for the Bulls. We like these tie-ins. And oh, by the way, there's more people, and just look at how we're reaching the masses. But you, in the meantime, with kind of this advanced socialism, you're still promoting like, well, we want the best team. We want the best team. So there's like this capitalist component to it. Then let Boise State play at home, right? It wouldn't have been that if you weren't so in love with the bowl tie-ins and having that be a part of your sport, and you really were about rewarding what was going on during the regular season, it wouldn't have been that hard to just let Boise play at home. If you really wanted to level the playing field and reward a team, then let Penn State go play on blue turf or wherever those games would have been. You know what I mean? It's my point in saying that is not just the specifics of Boise. It's just that the mix, we're saying multiple things
trying to serve
once.
Too many masters.
It just that's why it just doesn't work.
I'm all for it if we feel like if the reason for seeding them in the top 4 is because we feel like they're one of the 4 best teams, and not because they won their conference. If they can meet both of those criteria, is fine. Even if they don't win their conference and you feel like they're one of the 4 best teams, then if it in the case of Boise, they're going to have won their conference, like in all seriousness. But I give Boise a home game if they're one of the 4 best teams. Don't give them a home game because they won their conference championship and somehow there's this arbitrary rule that's why they deserve it.
I do agree that the bowl tie-ins and like trying to serve the bowl system while trying to have the best playoff product it's just not good. It's unnecessarily messy.
You got to show me how you can pull that off.
Mitch, real quick here, got about 90 seconds with you. If you were the college football commissioner, we've talked about a lot of different topics today. What's the first thing you're tackling? Is it the playoff format? Is it the calendar? Like
calendar?
Definitely the calendar.
It's the calendar because it's so all-encompassing. And the calendar, part of the calendar is the playoff, not necessarily how many. It can be how many teams are in the playoff, because how many teams are in the playoff impact the weekends and the weeks that you play on. So whether the playoff goes 4 weeks or 5 weeks, whatever. The calendar is the big thing because it's the portal, it's spring football, it's the conference championship weekend. It's when the season starts. It's signing day. All of that stuff comes into it. I think it's the number one issue for college football that needs to be addressed in 2025.
1 or 2 portal openings, Mitch.
I'm okay with 2. I'm okay with 2 10-day windows. Like I think they went overboard. The coaches did with their proposal to say cut this thing down to 10 days, and that's all you get for the entire calendar year. Now, if you're going to get rid of spring, if you're going to move spring football to June, which is which I think should be done, and that was part of the proposal that my colleague Scott Docterman came up with in his 10-point plan to reform the college football calendar that was out on The Athletic a couple weeks ago. And Scott and I talked about this in December. Like we both agreed, like forget about traditional spring football, put it in June. And then you can have your portal guys come in at the end of the spring semester, and you're not so worried about getting them into school in January, jamming that thing in. If that's the case, then I don't know that you need a second portal window. But if you're going to have spring football today, the way that it is, then I think you need another window in April. But they can both be 10 days.
Fantastic. That's Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Great stuff as always. We appreciate it, Mitch.
Thanks, Mitch.
Okay. Thanks, guys.